Hello, and welcome to Ask an Archaeologist. I'm Paul Duncan McGarrity. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Ask an Archaeologist with me, Paul Duncan McGarrity. This is going to be a very short introduction because I am about to do some editing late at night on a Saturday just before we put it out. And yeah, it's just been a very hectic time for me recently. So it's a case of just trying to get it all, the whole life thing fitted into probably about 50% enough time to get it all done. So with that in mind, I will stop waffling and say that this interview is with Sara Head, who is also known as Archaefantasies, and it's about sort of the pseudoscience element of the archaeological world, looking at various kind of conspiracy theories, how one goes about approaching narratives that rely less on facts and more on feelings and conjecture, and what those can mean for the sort of the heritage industry as a whole. So I hope you enjoy it. Thank you to everyone who has been subscribing. We've got lots of new lovely subscribers. Thank you all for joining us. Again, if you enjoy it, some of you have been in touch, and it's every time it's really lovely to hear from you. If you are enjoying it, please tell people about it. That's the best kind of advertisement, is when someone just sidles over to you and goes, "Yeah, that one's worth a listen." On that point, I don't know how many podcasts do this, but with absolutely no connection whatsoever to them, I can fully recommend Behind the Bastards as a podcast. It's one I've been listening to myself. Really well researched, really interesting, looking at the sort of untold stories of the worst people in history. And if you're on YouTube, because I just think you should, if you enjoy something, you should tell people about it. If you're on YouTube and you're a fan of rugby, I know, an odd thing to say, check out Squidge Rugby. He's been doing some really interesting videos, deconstructing the various teams that are going to be in the World Cup this year. A bit of a left field recommendation for a heritage podcast, I know, but I just want to let you know what I'm listening to and what I'm watching and what I'm enjoying, and seeing if there's any crossover there. Maybe you can enjoy it too. Without any further ado, as I say, this is Sara Head. You can ask me some questions for upcoming Q&As at Ask an Arc on Twitter. And if you can rate, review, do all the rest, that'd be super too. All right, till next time. Bye. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm very well. This is probably quite pertinent to our interview. We are doing a transatlantic call. Before anyone starts trying to guess the accent, it is from Philly. Is that right?
No, actually, I'm a Western girl, right. But I am living in Philly.
I see. Right. So where are you? Where do you hail from originally?
I am originally from Indianapolis, Indiana, so right smack in the middle of the right smack of the middle.
Oh, lovely stuff.
So,
well, yeah. So that means that obviously, with the time difference as it is currently 20 past 11. And because I love doing podcasts about archaeology, it is 20 past 11 on a Friday night.
Yeah, I mean, I am really impressed that you're staying up this late just to talk to me. I feel very special.
Well, so the reason this might be one of the more interesting podcasts is I am drunk.
Oh, it's no different than my usual podcast, and don't worry.
Fantastic. I have been out and I have been doing something called a Mary Lloyd, which is a Welsh tradition
for New Year, where they dress up a horse's skull in ribbons and then take it on a pub crawl.
I have seen this. I don't understand it.
Oh, it's great. I have no Welsh connections whatsoever, but as soon as someone said, "Do you want to sing in a language you don't speak next to a dead horse?" I was like, yes, I absolutely do.
What does the dead horse have to do with it? I need to know this.
I think it's some sort of, it's basically the genuine answer I was given was Celtic, innit?
No, I love it.
I thought it was a perfect sort of warm up for tonight's interview. So, hello, Sarah.
Hi, Paul. How's you going?
It's gone high risk all of a sudden.
Well, if it makes you feel better, I have a double caffeine, triple chocolate mocha frappe thing that I'm drinking. So
what many of us would call the most American drink.
No, it's full fat. We don't do any of that soy milk latte. No, anyway, I don't know. I made it myself. It's whatever I put in the blender.
Beautiful. Well, thank you again for being with us. First of all, you are the one of the hosts of the podcast Archae Fantasies. Is that correct?
I am. Yes.
Exquisite. I have got the right person.
One of them, yes.
One of them. How many of them? How many of them is there? How many of you are there?
I'm just impressed that your English is as good as mine. So there are three of us. There are three of us. There's Ken Fader and Jeb Card as well. So they're my full-time rotating hosts, and we have several guest hosts that come on a regular basis. So I guess I have a lot of co-hosts, I guess.
Yeah, that's quite nice. And the main theme of it seems to be, and please tell me if I'm selling you wrong here, but it's debunking the pseudoscience, sort of pseudo-archaeology, the stories. A good example of it would be the number of times people have asked me, well, how did the aliens really build the pyramids?
And to, of course, you say yes, because, that's the point of the show is we started off debunking, and now we kind of do a lot of exploring and studying, I want to say, of pseudo-archaeology now, because, the show's 4 years old, and when we first started it, it was just kind of a joke. Well, no, it wasn't a joke, but it was just kind of like, hey, wouldn't it be fun if? And so we did a really good job with that the first couple of years, and we hit on all the highlights, like the Cardiff Giant, and it's very North American focused because we're all from North America. But we have hit on some stuff overseas, and we talk about Stonehenge because you have to. But the last couple of years, the tone of the show has changed a lot, and it's become a lot more introspective of what pseudo-archaeology is, what does it look like, how should we interact with it, why is pseudo-archaeology, why do people why does it even exist for people to interact with, that kind of stuff.
Have we reached a point then in your discussions where we're now looking almost anthropologically at the creation of the stories and the myths that surround the histories of the stories and the myths?
I think we're definitely dipping our toe into that. We still like to talk about the odd thing. I have a couple interviews coming up where we'll be talking about Atlantis and Aquaman, and just fun stuff. If you're not having fun, why are you doing it? But at the same time, I personally have really gotten into the story behind the story. Where did this start? When did we start believing that there was this culture bringer race that came from on high and just kind of handed out culture to the people as they went on their merry way around the world? When did that start? That to me is interesting. So I guess we are kind of taking a turn that direction, but we still do really fun topics.
Okay. So what first attracted you to being involved in the world of archaeology?
I had to write an essay my senior year in high school, and we had to write about what we wanted to be when we grew up. And I wanted to be a writer, and I still do. Someday I'm going to write a book because everyone's doing that. And
yep.
But I wasn't allowed to write that for my essay, so I went to a book of college degrees, and anthropology and archaeology were the first two things in the book.
Wow. So basically, the page with Aardvark Keeper was you skipped that one.
Yeah. Like that wasn't a thing yet, so I just went with the age-old. Well, you won't let me be a writer, so I guess I'll get rich being an archaeologist, and we see how well that worked out. So
yeah. Because all the archaeology money we're all receiving.
Right. My fallback career is digging in the dirt.
Yeah. So basically, it was. Had you had any previous interest in history, and was this more like a sort of an aha moment, the sort of the calcification of a thought, or was it literally when you started reading, you were going, "Oh, this actually sounds quite interesting"?
No, I mean, I come from a very I hate to say it this way, but my dad was always reading, my mom was always reading, so like I was exposed to all kinds of stuff. I honestly had thought maybe philosophy would be great, but you can't really study philosophy without studying history, and you can't really study history without studying archaeology, and so like it just kind of all feeds into itself. And I don't know if I knew that being an archaeologist was a thing until I did the essay, but it didn't seem out. I mean, I wouldn't have written the essay about it if I hadn't have been like, yeah, sure, I can BS for like a couple paragraphs on this. So yeah, it was interesting to me. It wasn't too far outside of my experience, is what I'm saying. And I apologize for the alarm.
That's quite all right. So that's quite interesting. Archaeology as a career, then, what does that look like? Well, you've written this essay and you've started to decide, yeah, maybe I'm going to be interested in archaeology.
Oh my God.
What does that look like in the United States? Do you have access to do you get to go out and experience what it's like to be on a site, or is it straight to university, no prior sort of practical experience of archaeology?
So what I do in the real world, when I'm not doing a podcast, I am a cultural resource management archaeologist. So I do what is lovingly called contract archaeology. And that means I am not attached to a university or to an institution of any kind. I'm basically a freelance archaeologist. I'm hired by cultural resource management companies who are all private companies. And we have a series of laws here in the United States, the main one being Section 106, that requires any new, this is really just kind of the baseline for all of this. Any new excavations or building projects or anything like that require a cultural survey to go through to make sure there's nothing important in the area or something that could be damaged. And that doesn't just include prehistoric sites, it also includes historic sites. So now you guys, like, you just shovel off the first 300 years. Like, that would be all of our archaeology.
No, we don't.
I've seen that back. No, it's okay.
We only do that mostly.
Well, it's just you guys have so much history there. Like, put things into perspective.
I can see how we might get the impression of that, but
right.
We dig properly. We dig properly.
Oh, no, yes, of course.
It's just we take a little bit longer to dig the Roman stuff.
Well, that's it. Just like Philadelphia is. I'm probably gonna get corrected on this, but Philadelphia is the oldest city in the United States, and it's little over 400 years old. So that tells you how old our
historic archaeology is.
Yeah, the historic archaeology is. And then there's the prehistoric stuff that can go back even further depending on where you're at. We've got a site called Meadowcroft in northern PA here that is showing maybe signs of pre-Clovis peoples, maybe pre-Clovis culture, possibly. So, that's actually really exciting if that's what it turns out to be. So prehistorically, we've got some great stuff. Historically, we've only got 400-ish years, give or take, a little bit more than that. I don't know where I was going with this, but that's what archaeology looks like here. Like, I don't work for an institution, so I don't have research grants, and I don't have to publish papers or die or anything like that. I get called by a company who has a phase 1 or a phase 2 or a phase 3, and I think this might line up with your guys' heritage management.
So my background, I'm a commercial archaeologist as well.
There you go.
I'm permanently employed by an organisation because I'm actually quite interested to hear about the fact that you have planning laws in place that require... Now, I have to ask, when you do the survey and you've identified a cultural heritage site underneath a potential development, what happens next?
Well, it really depends on how significant the site is. It also depends on the company and the size of the site. I mean, here we have a debate going on about what constitutes a site. Is it one artifact, or is it 15 artifacts? Do you actually have to have structures in the ground? I mean, that's an open discussion. A lot of companies will try to avoid sites when they are located because we have 3 phases. Our phase 1 is our pedestrian survey, or we do a shovel testing depending on the area of the United States you're in.
So you're using slightly different terminology. When you say pedestrian, are you talking about like a walkover survey?
Yes, it's a walkover. I was going to say walkover. Yeah, so it's a walkover. Shovel testing. You guys shovel test?
Now, I don't think we do shovel tests as much. If I understand it, is that you stick a shovel in the ground and see what you see?
Yeah, basically, you depending on what state you're in, you dig a hole to a certain size and a certain depth. You check the dirt in that hole. You recover the artifacts. You check the soil stratigraphy to make sure there's not like a buried anything.
So it's a test pit, basically, like
it's
1
a test
meter by 1 meter test pit sort of thing.
Sometimes, yeah. Actually, when we start getting into the meter by meters, we're usually into a phase 2.
Really? It's that small a hole?
It can be. Depending.
So there's no other podcasts out there where someone will go, really? That's that small a hole? With that amount of excitement.
Yeah. So, yeah, no, I mean, we don't have a lot of, this is one of my pet peeves. We don't have a lot of standardization here in the States. It's a state-by-state basis, so depending on where you are, depends on how big your hole needs to be, and when you're actually in a phase 2 and when you've decided to go to a phase 3. So phase 3s are pretty basic. I mean, we all know what a phase 3 is, I assume. It's actual excavation.
Well, I was going to say, so ours are desk-based assessment, watching brief, test pit, excavation. So we have... What's a what?
What's a watching brief?
A watching brief is where you stand next to the hole being dug by a JCB and you watch to see if you can see anything.
Oh, okay. So that's like, we call that monitoring here. Okay, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We do that too. But that's not actually part of the survey. That just happens.
Pavement.
Right, exactly. That's a rock. You can keep going.
That sort of thing.
Yeah, no, that monitoring usually comes in after phase 1, 2, and 3 or have gone through and they've started excavating or they've started actually building. And you just basically stand there and make sure that they don't dig something up.
That's interesting.
Because, survey isn't perfect. It's a sampling. You can potentially miss something. So it's always good to have a second pair of eyes there.
Okay. So something just struck me there when you were saying that they were trying to avoid a site. You don't usually. You got a lot more space to play with then compared to us.
Yeah, we do. I mean, there's some large percentage of the United States isn't even like lived in right now. So we've got space to play. But I mean, we also have a lot of pipelines. That's where a lot of this comes into play. We get a lot of pipelines. What's the other one? Anyway.
Big infrastructure stuff.
Exactly. And they're going deep. So we have to make sure they're not going to hit anything or they're not going through like a culturally sensitive area, like the last oil pipeline that went through some sacred lands and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We're not always successful. We do what we can.
Yeah. So in that instances, I'm getting real into the policy with this one.
I just took this class. Go for it.
Yay! If someone did go ahead and wanted to build on a site which you've identified as culturally sensitive,
right?
Who pays for it? Who pays for the archaeological work? The company pays for it.
The company. And that's why they usually try to avoid them, because most companies don't want to go into phase 3 because now you have to pay everybody, you have to house everybody, you have to per diem everybody.
Everybody. Oh yeah.
Well, sorry. I mean, you have to take care of your archaeologists. I mean, that's the rule. But so a lot of companies don't want to do that because it's expensive, or it can be. And if the site is extremely significant. Like some of these village sites they found after they've already said that the archaeology was good. I mean, that was I want to say they were out there for 3 to 4 months recovering this site that they tried to build a casino on top of.
Right, I see.
So, and they had to pay for all of that.
Yeah, that's interesting. So is it quite a rare thing for an American development firm to be involved with archaeologists?
I mean, if they want to build something, they have to deal with us at some level.
Sorry, I mean, when you got... I'll give you the example. Over here, quite a lot of the larger development companies regularly have archaeologists on site as part of the...
Okay.
We first got legal protection for archaeology in 1990, and since then we've been part of the planning law, so it's nearly 30 years now. Mm-hmm. We've become a major part, particularly things like infrastructure. So you end up with big jobs like the Olympics had 13 months of archaeology prior to construction. Crossrail, it was all built into the programme. So we're getting to a point where people working in our construction sector, the people who are in the positions of middle management have been working in an industry that has had archaeologists as part of it regularly for 30 years. So what my next question is going to be, how are you perceived by the construction industry, and how regularly do they have to interact with you?
Oh man. So a lot of engineer firms, the bigger engineering firms here, they have on staff CRM people. So that they were just like, you know what, we're just going to create a division of CRM within our own company. And that's usually 1 or 2 people who run the office. And then when you need to have a project done, you hire people like me to come and help do the actual work. So that's how that works. There are hundreds of small private firms, CRM firms throughout the country who will put a bid in when a project comes up. And that's both with our government projects and, private companies. Like Amazon wants to build a warehouse. They have to have the area they're going to build the warehouse surveyed. So they don't have in-house people, so they have to hire people. What they think of us, I don't know. I don't know if we're just like another box they have to check before they can get the building built, because it's all regulation here. And I mean, we're Americans, we're notorious for our love of regulation. And
I think you kicked us out after a bad tea party for that sort of thing.
Dude, let's not even start. It wasn't even about that, man. It was just... You're
not supposed to use seawater. It's hot water.
Is it hot water? Is it? Because it's kind of tepid anymore. Anyway, I'm joking. No. I mean, but yeah, like I can't speak for the company, the companies who are trying to build things. I don't know. Maybe they think we're an annoyance. Maybe they're like, oh, I don't even know who you are.
But you never come do you come as a surprise to the builders that are there?
No. We are part of the process. Like they get their plans, they find out what area they're in, they have to call in us, they have to call in bio people, they have to call in some other firm. There's a whole bunch of stuff that has to happen before you can even put a shovel in the ground to construct. So they're used to it by now, is what I'm saying. I mean, our laws have been around since the 70s, so we've only got 20 more years on you.
Yeah. Nice. You are contracted site to site.
I do, yes.
Does that mean that you are regularly employed? Is there enough archaeology work in the US to keep you constantly employed? Or do you have downtime? How secure a job is it as an archaeologist in the US?
Oh, wow. So how secure it is depends on the year and the administration. How busy I am depends on how willing I am to travel. If I personally don't like to go too far away from Pennsylvania because that's home base for me now. But in my younger years, I was employed full time pretty much all year long, but I also had to work I was in Illinois 1 month, and then I was in Kentucky the next month, and then I was in Georgia and Alabama. Did a job in Louisiana. I haven't been out west. They have different different hoops you have to jump through, and also it's hot, and I'm not a hot person. But I mean, if you're willing to travel, you can manage a full-time employment. Especially, it's a small field here, so especially once you get established, people know who you are, you start making connections. It's really just a matter of, hey, my project's wrapping up, where's the next one to go to? And people will usually give you a heads up. I mean, if you're fresh out of college, you might have a little bit of a time breaking in, but I think right now it's pretty decent. I know in the Midwest that they're pretty much hiring whoever they can get, because it's one of those points in the cycle where they need workers, and it's a workers market right now. But 4 years ago, it was rough. So things come and go in cycles.
Yeah. How much practical experience did you get while you were at university as a student?
I'm sorry, what? Can you repeat the question?
Ah, right. So it wasn't fieldwork heavy then. Where did you go to university? Sorry.
I did my undergraduate at IU, so Indiana University, at the IUPUI campus in Indiana. So
did you have to do anthropology and archaeology?
Our archaeology is usually underneath our anthropology, or it's underneath our history department. So my undergraduate degree is actually in anthropology. My master's degree I'm going to Adams State University out in Colorado, and that will actually be a master's degree in CRM. So it's very specific to the field I want to continue to work in.
Okay, cool. Excellent. And so you didn't have much in the way of field work while you were doing the anthropology, archaeology degree in the undergraduate?
And this is a complaint that a lot of archaeologists have about pretty much any school they go to. There's a couple really great schools. I know there's one in Arizona that basically just it's the gold standard for archaeology. But a lot of colleges who provide an anthropology degree try to do the 4-field approach. So they're trying to give you a smattering of linguistics, physical, archaeology, and social. So you don't really get a lot of anything is the thing. And then you're expected to specialize when you get to your master's degree. So, but you can work in CRM with a bachelor's degree, which is great because you need to do something with your bachelor's degree.
So what was it like when you first turned up? What was your first site? And how is that first experience of going from no practical experience to working in the field?
Well, I got really lucky because my field school when I was at college was the person leading it made sure that we at least had the experience of doing shovel test pits and then doing the phase 2 pits. So I knew that they existed. And then my very first job was actually was basically an academic job. So we had a field lab. We had really nice equipment. We had a budget. I mean, we had all the time we wanted. I mean, it was a field job. My first CRM job was a pipeline job, and I showed up with my gear. I mean, I had field gear. I was good. But I had never used a compass before. I didn't know the difference between green field and developed field. And so my very first CRM job, I show up, they gave me a screen and a shovel. I had my lunch in my backpack, and they're like, here's your bearing, and then walked off. And I'm standing there with a compass that I don't know how to read. I don't even think it was the right kind of compass because most people get the wrong kind of compass when they first start. So I'm like, I don't fucking know what I'm doing. I don't know what my pace is. He's like 30 feet in, go. And I'm just like, I don't know what you mean. So that was a little shocking, but fortunately there were some people on the crew. I mean, obviously I wasn't the first person to ever have this happen to them, but so there were people on the crew who took me under their wing. They helped me sharpen my trowel. I mean, they taught me how to pace and what my count needed to be, how to read a compass, how to read a map properly. I mean, it was most of the experience that I have doing CRM, I learned in the field, and that's usually how it works here.
Yeah, I'm going to say that this is a very strange difference that I just came up when you were talking there. you learn to sharpen your trowel.
Oh, that's right. You guys don't sharpen your trowels, do you?
No.
That's right. Do you guys even use trowels?
Yes.
Do you? Okay.
But what a strange difference.
Well, okay, so here's the thing. If you don't sharpen your trowel, you should. You only sharpen one side. No, follow me on this. You only sharpen one side.
All right. I've got an open mind.
So it's just the one side is sharp. You don't sharpen the bottom part. And the reason that you do this is you're not scraping your dirt. You're cutting it. And
No, you're scraping it.
No.
The differences are we'll
no.
never be one nation again.
But the soil profile is so much better when you cut the dirt, because you take that tiniest little sliver off the top, and you can actually see everything all nice and clear, as opposed to just smearing it across from one corner to the other.
Well, I was going to say, what's your wood and leather preservation like in the sites that you're excavating? Because if you've got a sharp tool, you're going straight through that.
Well, actually, you learn real quick when you come across something that looks fibrous that you just stop. You stop, you outline it as much as possible. You use the tip of your trowel to kind of feel around it, unless you can see an outline. You pedestal, you leave it alone, and then you go back in with, I use putty knives from when you mix paint. I've got a nice set of those I use, and that way I know I'm not going to damage too much, because we get a lot of bone out here too, and a sharp trowel, a properly sharpened trowel will go through bone if you're not careful.
Oh, yeah. And you can defend yourself when you're in the field. So
I have had my trowel confiscated by the airports because it was considered a weapon. So yes, that has happened to almost every archaeologist I know who flies with their trowel.
All right, we're going to stick with tools for a little bit, right? I've got many more questions. No, right. There used to be a thing. I'm not out on site as much anymore, but the smaller your trowel was.
Oh God, this.
Right, does that happen in America? So, for the listeners who haven't heard this, the smaller the trowel was, the idea was the more ground you'd been digging, so the more experience you had.
Right.
And when it gets to a point where it's an absolute nubbin, and people then throw them away and get a new trowel.
Right. Or you just dig a lot of sand. I mean, let's be honest. Yeah, no, that was the thing when I first started working. I haven't really heard too much of that a lot lately. I don't even understand it, because I've been through 3 different trowels in the time that I've been working. I mean, I wish I still had my first trowel, but it got eaten by the Hoosier, and that's basically the Bermuda Triangle of forests out in the Midwest. So
yeah. My first trowel went after 2.5 years, and I was absolutely furious.
Yeah. I was not pleased because I had that one for about 3 years when I lost it. Anyway, but yes, I mean, I'm on my 3rd trowel now, and I like it. It's a good trowel, but it's it's starting to. I like it.
It's not the first one, though, is it?
No, it's not. No, it's never the same. But I don't know. I think it's a silly thing. I think it's something from the good old days. It's incredibly impractical. I mean, if you think about it, the smaller your trowel gets, the less you can do with it. I mean, it's great for like little tiny things, but how often do you really encounter that? Well, you guys probably do a lot, but out here, you don't get that much often. You want a nice big broad trowel. I know people that go and get like the those giant bricklayer trowels. Oh yeah, they're great. You go and you get that, and then you sharpen the one edge, of course, and it's basically just it's like a shovel. It's like a little hand shovel, and you can just move so much dirt that way. But we use a variety of stuff out here too. We also use sharpened hoes. We use pickaxes. We use.
Yeah. Do you have mattocks?
Yes, we use mattocks. I just got my first one. I am in love with it. The one end is nice and sharp, so that it just like nothing stops it, man. It just goes through everything. I love it.
I've just got images of you all sat there in break, just sharpening all your tools.
Yes, that's exactly what happens.
You're gonna look like you're hunting the predator.
Well, I mean, you gotta sneak up on those artifacts, man. They can get away from you if you're not careful.
The first time I ever swung a mattocking angle.
Oh no.
Yeah. You know where this story goes, don't you? We were excavating in a graveyard.
Oh.
And I was told that there was 2 grave cuts either side of this trench, and that I should cut down the middle.
Mm-hmm.
But someone had misinterpreted it, and what it actually was the grave cut was down the middle, and it was the natural on either side.
Ooh, wow.
On the third time I swung a mattock, it went through the skull of the person in it.
Oh, dear. I'm so sorry.
That's all right. That's how you find them, isn't it?
Well, we avoid our dead here as much as possible.
You see, you probably don't have. Do you get anything like cemetery clearances then? 'Cause
Yes.
I've cleared 5 cemeteries in my career now, which I think personally accounts for about 450, 500 bodies.
We have actually. There are people that specialize in cemetery relocation and cemetery projects. We have a lot of laws regulating what we can and cannot do with cemeteries. Most of the time, the policy is to avoid them at all costs. And it really doesn't matter like who's buried there, but it does get even worse when it's a sensitive site like African American graveyards, Native American burial grounds. One of the first projects I worked on when I was first out of school was a cemetery relocation because my minor focus is in osteology, so I was really valuable at the time. But we were there on purpose to be moving people, so that's completely different than I've worked on several historical sites where we know there is a cemetery and we've marked it off, we leave it alone. And of course, people get buried outside of the fence line, so you have to mark off that distance as well.
Yeah.
So, we we also have the luxury of being able to avoid cemeteries. Like, we're not so crowded, like you said.
Yeah.
You do occasionally get the surprise burial, especially on historic sites, because a lot of times on homestead sites where it's just an old farm, people just kind of buried themselves wherever they were going to be, and they're not necessarily marked. And sometimes you just come across somebody, but that's not as common as people like to think.
Right, fair enough. That's very interesting. So you've been off to university. You've got your masters. You're just reading your masters at the moment, is that right?
I will be doing my internship and thesis this year, end of this year, beginning of next year. So hopefully I will walk in 2020.
Best of luck.
Thank you.
But you've come out of university, you started working in CRM.
Yes.
And then Archaefantasy starts, is that correct?
Yes.
Is that the right way around?
Yeah, actually, yeah. So everybody's read something in pseudo-archaeology. Usually it's Von Daniken or Graham Hancock, one of the two of them.
Can you go, just to clarify for people who maybe haven't heard the term, what is pseudo-archaeology?
Pseudo-archaeology is a combination of two words. No,
Webster's defines
it as. It is a pseudo-archaeology is bad or false archaeology, willfully so. So people who are using the field of archaeology or the idea of archaeology to bolster a false or misleading concept, much like aliens, lost civilizations, Atlantis, that kind of stuff.
When you say willful,
yes,
does that mean that the person is willfully trying to mislead their audience, or are they always are these people knowingly perverting facts, or are they interpreting facts to match what they perceive as something that's happened?
So the delicate answer to that is I cannot be in someone's head, and I cannot say for 100% whether they believe what they are saying is true or not.
Right.
However, the effect is they are using archaeological artifacts and facts in a way that has at some point been pointed out to them to be incorrect. And they continue to interpret things that way for the purpose of supporting their concepts. I don't want to call it a theory because that gives it too much credit. Personally, I think a lot of these people that, especially the more well-known, I think they believe about 30 to 50% of what they're saying, and the rest of it is, I need to sell a book. I need to keep my name out there. I have a television show I need to keep on air. I mean, I think once you become a big enough name, the reality of things start to set in. And I don't think you're 100% a true believer anymore.
So what is Archie Fantasies then? What was it, the kernel of it? How did it start?
It started because I used to be a real big proponent of the skeptics movement. I was very much against the misuse of science in general to perpetuate things like homeopathy, or unfortunately I do have kind of an agenda against religion, but that's me personally. But yeah, I was a member of skeptical organizations, and I was like, how can I best use what I know to kind of, help the skeptical movement? And it was, well, I'm an archaeologist. I know things about archaeology, and archaeology gets used a lot to support things like creationism. It gets used to support, the whole, excuse me, I'm sorry, my cold.
That's all right.
The whole thing of like ancient aliens, which we're always going back to because that show's been on has been on the air for like 15 years now. Yeah, I tried to cover that one up. So sorry. It's been on the air forever. I really wish it would go away. But there's other shows like Unearthed America, where it was basically this guy going around just making stuff up, man. I mean, like, some of the stuff he would come up with, I'm just like, he would say one thing in one show and then the exact opposite thing in another show, and he would be using the same artifact in both shows to support both theories. And I'm just like, you cannot tell me that you believe both of these things at the same time.
Oh, that's really annoying.
Yeah.
That's thoroughly annoying.
But these are the shows that get on the air here in the States.
So you've seen these things, you're watching them, you get irked. What do you decide to do about it?
Early on, I just wrote a really angry blog post about it. As time went on and I got followers, I tried YouTube, because YouTube was, okay, this is dating myself. Back when I was on YouTube, you could only have the video that was 15 minutes long.
Oh.
I know, which I thought was actually kind of a neat format because it made you really kind of compress and think about what you wanted to say. So that was that. I didn't stick with YouTube. I stuck with the blog. I joined Twitter, so then I could like angrily tweet out into the universe why I was perturbed that particular day. And from there, the podcast came about, and the podcast is on its 5th year now. And the podcast has been very successful, and I'm very proud of it. I'm proud of my co-hosts. I'm very impressed with my own podcast, and I hate to be like that, but but I am.
Fantastic. Hey, come on! You've got to believe in it. Otherwise, no one else is going to make you do it.
It's a damn good podcast, and I'm sorry for that one, but it is.
That one can stay. Do you think? How long did you say you've been running for on the podcast?
We just started our 5th year this year.
You just started your 5th year?
Yeah. What
do you think has been the impact of the podcast on the listeners?
I just judging from the emails that I get from people and the interactions that I have on Twitter, because I'm very active on Twitter. So if you want to come yell at me, go find me there. But people tell me how they enjoy hearing actual archaeological facts about things. They tell me how much they enjoy hearing archaeologists be frank about what's going on in the field of archaeology, but they also like being told facts about things that they have been told were true when they're not, like the presence of giants in America or things like that. I know people are using it as teaching material in their classes. That makes me really happy that they see enough value in the podcast that they're like, you know what, I'm going to make my college kids sit through this. So that kind of stuff really makes me excited. So overall, I think the impact has been very positive. and it's been very well received. And that's great. I mean, that's what everybody wants for their podcast.
Yeah. Are there any particular themes that you've covered that have had sort of noticeably positive or negative reactions from the people who've been listening in?
Interestingly, the podcasts that get the most polarized one way or the other reactions, it tend to be anything we do on religion, which, it's kind of a no-brainer. Weirdly, anything we do with Native American topics, because it's kind of a real sensitive topic here. And for whatever reason, people just will not accept that Native Americans' ancestors were the first people in the States. Like, they just won't do that. I'm just like, stop it. But the other ones that get really good positive feedback are we've started doing a series on ancient DNA and archaeology. And we've been doing that since last year. And those are some of my top episodes over the past 2 years. And I'm really happy about that because it's such an emerging field. And we're learning a lot from DNA, about DNA. And, we there's too many things out there right now that are like, oh, I went and had my DNA tested and I found out I'm 3/4 Cherokee. And I'm like, you're not 3/4 Cherokee. You're not a Cherokee. It's not how this works.
Yeah.
But we're able to discuss that on the show and that kind of stuff. So I'm really happy that those particular episodes are really hitting a mark with the listeners.
That's cool. You said that you tried YouTube for a while.
Yeah.
Why did you come away from that as a format?
So I was on YouTube for about a year. And the reason I tried YouTube was because I've had, way back in the day, I was on a very small television program that I assure you no one has ever heard of, because unless they lived in Rockford during that year, they have no idea.
What was it called?
It was just the little commercial cuts in between cartoons on Saturday evening or Saturday mornings. And I was a kid reporter, and I was telling you what the next cartoon
brilliant.
was as if it was a news report. It was a lot of fun, actually. But yeah, unless you lived in Rockford at the time, you have no clue what I'm talking about.
Oh, I hope I've got one listener who's like, oh my God, it's her!
Oh God, if someone can find the clips of that, which I highly doubt anybody can, but I would probably just die of embarrassment, but honestly.
A lot of my listeners are very good at research.
Oh my God. I just screwed myself right there. But yeah, so I was like, oh, YouTube, no problem. I've got some TV experience because I did this thing this one time. Obviously, I'm an expert. It was a lot of fun. I enjoy video format. It's great. The problem is you can't hide behind anonymity on YouTube very well. And I mean, I tried to be really quirky about it. I tried to be funny. I came up with little characters and took on little funny names and would wear disguises and stuff because I had some male characters and some female characters, and I made some claymation. I mean, I had a lot of fun with it, but the comments that I would get from people, there's a lifespan, and this is still true on YouTube today. There's a lifespan in the comments section of a video, and it's the first 20 comments are going to be something actually about the video. And they're going to be actually maybe somebody with real input or an actual question about the video or the content of the video. And then after that 20th comment, you can count you can count it all the way down. After that 20th comment, I would get things like, well, you're so fat and ugly, why should anyone listen to you? And I'm like, that has nothing to do. I could be dog ugly. Has nothing to do with the content of the video. And those were just the ones that got approved. I would get private comments a lot of times. One guy threatened to tie me to a pole naked and flog me. I got a couple very unpleasant physical threats. I mean, I don't know why people feel like that is in any way acceptable to do to anyone. But yeah, it's a reality for women on the internet that we routinely don't get arguments against our comments. We get insults and threats against our persons because we're in a space.
Yeah. So these weren't necessarily tied to the arguments that you were making on YouTube.
Usually they had nothing to do with the video whatsoever.
It's just a woman has an opinion attack.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. When you did, I've seen on your website you have a few comments on there as well, which follow a similar pattern. But you said that these were your approved ones. These are the ones that you've moderated.
Yes, I did. I moderate the website. That's been my policy since I started the blog. The blog's been around for over 10 years now. I've had it longer than anything. And I decided early on, because of my experience with YouTube, that I wanted to moderate my comments. But I didn't want it to look like I only put the happy comments up because, sometimes people make a point and I may not agree with them, but they're still making a point. So my policy was, as long as someone's not being like aggressively attacking myself or someone else or making physical threats or being just like unnecessarily vulgar. I usually approve pretty much everything. Sometimes I'll get comments that are just like, "You're stupid," and I'm like, I'm not. Technically, that doesn't violate my policy, but I'm not posting it either because it doesn't contribute anything.
You've added nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, you're stupid is the, I mean,
right,
we could just
is
do
that what
all
we're
day.
going to do? Like, I could do this. It could be a cathartic moment for myself, but yeah, no.
Well, not quite you're stupid, but there was a couple of comments I saw on there where people were questioning whether you had the authority to speak on to say that you were an expert in this field as an archaeologist. They were questioning whether you as an archaeologist had the authority to speak and had the education to do so. Have you come across any sort of kickback of the idea of having an expert opinion and that being, is that worth more, less, or the same as someone who is not necessarily an expert in that field?
I mean, that's a very take it as it comes kind of a thing. Like, you can be an expert on a particular topic, and that doesn't make you an expert on everything. I try to stay within my own experience as an archaeologist and the things that I have done. Fortunately, as I have progressed in my field, I have experienced more, I have done more, I can speak with authority on more. But when I run into things that I can't, I try to bring somebody of authority in, like when I'm talking about DNA. I am not talking about DNA. I bring in an expert who tells me things about DNA, and I defer to them. But when it comes to things like, I get challenged a lot on the blog about my credentials and if I'm even able to talk about something. I think there's a point where you could potentially have enough real world experience without a degree or without a series of letters after your name that you could be considered capable of discussing a topic. But I have not found that to be true that often when I'm on the internet. I mean, I can literally I don't even know if I can list two. I can think of one person right off the top of my head that I would consider an expert in archaeology and pseudo-archaeology who is not themselves an archaeologist. And no, I said, I'm sorry. You look like you were going to talk, so I just stopped. I'm sorry.
No. I breathed in heavy.
I'm so sorry. But no. I mean, like I said, I don't encounter it very often. And usually when people are telling me that, it's usually they're like not qualified to be talking about it either. So
why do you do this?
Oh, man. I don't know. I just have this thing about misinformation. I don't like misinformation. I like things to be as factual as possible. And that's even if it's an ugly fact and we don't like that fact, I still feel like in order to have a conversation about something, you have to know all of the true and factual things about it, or as true and as factual as we have. Because we also have to understand that our knowledge base is constantly changing. And what we consider to be concrete today may not be. That is in no way me opening the door for anything pseudo-archaeological becoming true. It's just me acknowledging that, at least in the field of archaeology, theory has changed over the years, and theory does impact perception a great deal within the field. And we have to acknowledge that. But you can't even start to have that conversation unless you're willing to acknowledge facts as we have them. So it bothers me when people start, and facts require evidence, is where I'm going with this, is in order for something to be factual, it has to be backed up with evidence. And when I see people start throwing things around, claiming things and saying things that cannot be supported, it bothers me, because especially when there's someone in a position of authority or perceived authority, it can taint how other people see a topic. Archaeology is an excellent example. I mean, who did build the pyramids? Exactly. That's my thing. Like, I know who built the pyramids, but how many books are there out there talking about, no, the pyramids are grain silos, the pyramids are for water storage, the pyramids are alien teleportation devices, the pyramids are stargates, the pyramids are remnants of Atlantis. I mean, and these people, because they have a book out, and then they come up with a really cool backstory for themselves that just sounds really neat, they have a perceived authority on a topic. And then little old archaeologist comes along who is just me, and I go, no, we know the Egyptians built the pyramids. We kind of basically know how they did it too. I mean, we have documentation. They wrote this shit down. I'm sorry. They wrote this stuff down. And people don't believe me because they've already watched a television show, read a book, listened to somebody else's podcast about how, no, it was Bigfoot. I mean, it's that kind of stuff. And I just want to correct the record, I guess, because I know that there are people out there who are like, I don't know, man, I read this book that said it was aliens, but it seems kind of far-fetched. But at the same time, archaeology is not really great about communicating with the public, so I don't have any resources to fall back on that are actually factual. So I like to be that person who's like, here, these are the facts as we know them, as archaeologists. You can make your decision, hopefully correctly, in my opinion, that it was not aliens, because there's no evidence of aliens, and there is evidence of the Egyptians. We have their trash, we have their records, we have their cemeteries, we have their tools, we have blueprints. I mean, we have these things. I don't know if we have blueprints, but I'm pretty sure we do. I will look that one up. But my point being, I have evidence on my side, and people need to know what evidence looks like. So I need to show them my evidence. So they're like, okay, this is evidence, and this is what evidence looks like. So that they can then look at something else and be like, wait, you don't have this evidence. Like Ken likes to say, where's the trash? And then they can evaluate those two claims, hopefully, and come to the conclusion that things that don't have evidence cannot be factual.
Do archaeologists have a moral obligation to challenge pseudoscience, particularly examples of it that might be seen as detrimental to people who are alive today? I'm thinking examples of like how sometimes ancient DNA has been politicized, particularly with regards to migration and things like that. Personally,
I think that yes, we do, but that is my personal opinion on it, and that comes with the caveat that not everyone is able to do that for whatever reason. I mean, they may be afraid of losing their job, afraid of speaking up. I mean, back when I started doing this, you didn't talk about pseudo-archaeology in an academic setting because you were considered a kook. Like, not bringing up the idea that these weird pseudo-archaeology ideas could be real, just bringing up the idea that, hey, maybe we should be doing something about these claims. That was a no-no academically. Nowadays, because I'm so old, now when we have these conversations, I mean, there's two symposium. The SAA's Society for American Archaeology is coming up in April. There's two symposiums there that are dealing with archaeology represented in pop culture, and then I'm leading one with my co-chair, and we are directly discussing pseudo-archaeology and how archaeologists and academia should be interacting with it. So it's moved from being something that you can't discuss at all because you could get a black mark to no, we need to be discussing this, and we need to be discussing it up front and together.
How do you think you should archaeology as an industry should challenge pseudo-archaeology?
I think we should, especially organizations like the SAAs and the AAAs, and I don't know if you guys have the...
Sorry, who are the SAAs?
Yeah, right. So there's the Society for American Archaeology and the Anthropological Association of America, and the big organizations that have the funds to do these kind of things. I think they should be putting more effort into making competing television shows that can be broadcast on a popular network, not just, I mean, I like public television. It's great. It exists. It's not like you guys have over there. Our public television is on the way back channel where no one even looks at it because we don't like to pretend. We like to pretend like it doesn't exist. But the big cable networks, they can put anything they want up. And I'm looking at history and travel and the site.
Oh, history, isn't that the Sharks and Nazis network?
Not anymore. It's the Aliens, Sharks, and Nazis network.
Right.
But that's my point. Like, I mean, History Channel isn't even history anymore. I mean, it should make you question how factual are these Nazi documentaries that they're putting out there. I mean, I don't watch them myself, and I don't really know that much about Nazis because whatever. But can you really trust that documentary when the next thing that comes on the air is how aliens are genetically altering human beings so that we can become a super race for them to enslave? Like, is that really what you want?
Cool. Love your History Channel.
Yeah.
There's a history on it.
Yeah.
Sorry. This is probably the condescending ivory tower response that probably doesn't help matters, but come on!
Well, but see, like, you should have that reaction. You should be like, that's utter crap. And then the next step should be, I'm going to go tell you why that's utter crap. And then you should find the format that's best for you to tell people why it's crap. And do it in a polite way. Because just coming out and screaming in someone's face that it's crap is not going to help. But, breaking it down for them and being like, look, it can't be this because X, Y, Z. And make something rational and talk to people like they're human beings. And you'll get a pretty good reaction out of it. If after you've laid out your argument and you've put everything forward that you have and they're still saying things like, well, facts aside, then you can't have a conversation with that person.
No.
And you have to be like, you know what? You and I are not going to see eye to eye. You are wrong. Hopefully people who are watching this or listening to this will pick up on that. And, I have armed them with information that they can go forward with.
Unfortunately, I'm running out of time, but I could genuinely talk to you for hours more. This is fascinating.
Well, thank you.
We'll just stick with a couple of final questions.
Okay.
Number one, if there was one concept in pseudoscience that you could see disappear tomorrow,
oh God,
which one would it be?
Oh man, there's so many. I would really like to get rid of this idea that cultures around the world, particularly it tends to be cultures consisting of brown or non-white people, that they were not somehow capable of creating their own culture. I would really like to see that die. Because the racism of that comment is just so gross that it's damaging and it needs to go away. So I would really like to see that whole culture bearer idea go away. That would,
yeah.
But there are so many of them to pick from. I mean, like there's so many other things that I would really like to. I'd like for all of it to just kind of stop.
You only get one.
I know.
The archaeologist.
I know. Give me an inch, I take a mile.
I know. That's that attitude that ended up with the British Museum.
Lord.
Two last questions, and then you're out of here. You're
Okay.
free to your Friday night
I'm
and
just
my
gonna go roleplay
Saturday
online,
morning.
so
Woo!
exciting.
Sight dog or sight cat?
Oh, sight cat. Cats just so much. Well, I mean, I like dogs. Don't get me wrong, but cats don't poop in your unit usually, and if they do, it's usually just a little scoop and you're done.
Okay. Incredibly practical. Last question then. You work in the heritage industry.
Yes.
Hmm?
Well,
How would
we call it CRM here. Just
That's fine.
This is
But you work in and around heritage.
right.
How would you like to be remembered?
Oh man, I would actually like to be remembered for the person that, really championed the fact that we need to be confronting pseudo-archaeology, like in and out of the field. I would really like to see my colleagues who do CRM, because we are so removed from academia sometimes. Like some of us haven't even been back in school for 30 years, which is fine. I'm not knocking it at all. But I would like to see those people take their knowledge base, and when outsiders walk up to us when they see us working and they're like, some factually incorrect statement about Native Americans, I would like to see my colleagues say, actually, or maybe not say actually, because that's such a loaded word these days, but just be like,
push their glasses up their face.
Right.
Actually.
Well, actually. I would just like them to take a minute and explain to people when they walk up and talk, how the facts are, and not just turn a blind eye to crazy talk. I found crystal skulls over in them there hills. I bet you didn't, but you might have found some crystals. I mean, maybe they're roughly skull shaped. My favorite story is
found a big pile of stolen crystal skull vodka.
Right. I have one of those because I have to. There was a guy who claimed he had a werewolf skull, and I love this story because you could not convince him that he did not have a werewolf skull. And when it was examined by the state archaeologist, not himself but his department, it was found that this is actually a pig skull.
Oh, okay.
But he would not be convinced otherwise. And it's that kind of stuff. Like, okay, the crazy guy walks up to you and he has a pig skull and he's insisting it's a werewolf. I get it. You want to walk away. But just for a minute, like, just try and be like, might be a pig.
Yeah.
I mean, just try. Just try is what I'm asking.
Brilliant.
I mean, it might be a werewolf, but you don't know.
Hey, if it is a werewolf, really interesting paper.
That's true. That is definitely going to be a fun one to present at the next SAAs.
Sara Head, thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Is there anything you'd like to plug before you're free?
I have a podcast. I don't know if people know that. It's called Archaeological Fantasies. It comes out twice a month, usually the first and third Monday when I get around to it. And yeah, give us a listen, send us a message, hit us up on Twitter. We're all over the internet. I would really appreciate to hear back from some people.
Wonderful. And again, thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you for having me on.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Ask an Archaeologist podcast with me, Paul Duncan McGarity. The music you were listening to was by From the Ashes. Check them out on Bandcamp. It was produced by me, Paul Duncan McGarity. You can follow me on Twitter at AskAnArch, or you can send an email at askanarch@gmail.com. But most importantly, if you've enjoyed yourself and you think you have a friend who might be interested in the podcast, please tell them about it. Write a review, put up a star rating, let people know that we're here. It's incredibly helpful and much appreciated. Once again, thank you to everyone who has asked an arc. Bye-bye.